Yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Intriguing Individuals podcast. Today's intriguing individual is Sammy Potter. He is a hiker who just completed the calendar year Triple Crown, the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Pacific Crest Trail, and he is one of the youngest people to do it with his friend Jackson Parell. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, you nailed it. A lot of people say Parell, which doesn't bother me, but I probably bothers him more than me.
Nailed it.
Yeah. We finished up on October 22nd, so
Wow.
just about a month ago.
That was my brother's birthday.
Just special day. Yeah.
Dude, well, first of all, congratulations, because your accomplishment is seriously monumental, and I'm really impressed, as well as a lot of other people, especially as someone who likes to hike and who considers himself an outdoorsman. So congrats on that. But before I start asking you questions and everything, I would like to just summarize what you've done with, I think, a post that you did on Instagram.
Okay.
So, some stats. You and your friend, Jackson, 295 days of hiking, 7,000 miles, even though evidently you're still calculating the final total with the CDT alts
Yes,
that
exactly.
you took, 10 million steps, 7 bear encounters, 1 million feet of elevation gain, which is like climbing Everest from sea level 100 times, climbing up to Everest from sea level 100 times, 3 million calories consumed, which is about 5,000 per day per person, 12 pairs of shoes each. Shout out to Merrill for the replacements.
Yeah, for real.
1 cavity, Jackson. Lots of minor injuries, 0 trek-threatening injuries, and countless laughs and smiles.
Yeah, well, the one caveat is I don't know if I have any cavities yet. I haven't been to the dentist yet, so let's hope that stat doesn't change.
Yes, I'll say a prayer for you, buddy.
Yeah.
So, did you consider yourself a big hiker before you even went on this trek, before you guys even embarked on it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I consider myself an outdoors person, just by nature of being from Maine. I had spent a bunch of time up in Baxter State Park, in the Allagash Waterway, in Acadia, down south here. I'm a cross-country runner growing up. But I wouldn't say, the longest trek I had ever done leading up to this was 200 miles. 200 is nothing compared to 7,500. 200, you always see the end. You always see the end in sight. And I'd done 2 semi-major treks like that before. But doing a long trail is a challenge that's completely different from any other outdoor experience. So, no, we basically were novices going into this.
Dude, that's so freaking wild.
Yeah, it's wild. It's really wild. I think at this time last year, that was kind of something we were a little scared about, being complete novices. But it's cool. After the fact, you can look back and be well, look at how much we've grown.
Dude, that's freaking sick. Yeah. What inspired you to do something like this? Whose idea was it? When was the genesis of it? And yeah, how did it just all start, even just as an idea?
Yeah, I think it was largely a product of the pandemic. So March 2020, I had to leave campus. I go to school out in California, and because it was kind of a hub of the coronavirus early on, and so I had to leave campus, and simultaneously, basically at the same time, my best friend passed away, which was totally jarring to me, and I was definitely spiraling somewhat, and really just attached to wanting to escape in some way. And I came across this idea of the CYTC, the calendar year triple. Initially thinking that I would just hike the AT, but when I found that idea and realized only 9 people, I think it was 9 at that time, had ever done it, and realizing that it was going to be a chance for me to do something that felt A, significant, and then B, just something meaningful to attach to. I started making every decision in pursuit of that goal. So I picked up a job. I was still in school, but picked up a job to start making money, training constantly, reading constantly, figuring out as much about the trails as I could, hiking all the time, running all the time, and then eventually picked up my buddy Jackson in mid-July, and convinced him to join me as well. And I think that was a huge step to have someone to do it with, But I think it was late March when I initially decided to do it, of 2020, and that gave us 9 months to prepare.
That was right when the pandemic was basically hitting.
Yeah, exactly. It hit a little earlier. If you remember, like out in California, like San Francisco and New York, I think were the big hubs at the time. I go to school like right near San Francisco. Not to go on too much of a tangent, but the guy who lived across the hall from me in my dorm was the first one on campus to be diagnosed with coronavirus.
No way.
So pretty much everyone in my dorm was like immediately exposed to it.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so it hit us like really fast.
Dude, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So was it tough to convince Jackson to do it, or was he reluctant at first?
No, it wasn't. I wasn't even trying to convince him. I just told him about the idea and thought maybe he would join me for a little. We were hiking in the White Mountains together in mid-July. Okay. Just doing we were doing the presidential traverse, so all the 10 prezzies in a day, which is also part of the AT. Told him about the idea. He was like super hyped about it. And a week later we were partners, but it wasn't like I didn't even have an agenda to get him to join. He was just like super crazy about the idea too.
It must be so rare to meet someone like that who who thinks exactly like you and wants to who would actually be on board for something like that. And the crazy thing too is the AT itself is an accomplishment to do in a year. You know what I mean? Like that's like something that people might only do once.
Right.
So the fact that you guys ended up doing the AT and the Continental Divide and the Pacific Crest Trail is just obviously very mind-blowing.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing for us still, to look back on, and I think the key was to start as early as possible. So we started on January 1st, knowing that the first 2 months, January and February, we knew they were going to be hell. There was no way around that. But our ideology was let's just get through the first 2 months and then we'll be, 1,000 miles in, even at a pretty slow pace. And that will set us up pretty well to not have to speed through the rest of it.
Okay, yeah. You guys started in Georgia in January 1st.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and that went for a few months, but you guys ended up experiencing some kind of difficulty on the trail that
a lot of difficulty.
You.
We so Georgia was pretty easy. North Carolina, Tennessee was not too bad. The Smokies were pretty rough, but when we got up through Virginia all the way to Pennsylvania, we started going through snowdrifts that were over our heads. And so we'd be basically bushwhacking through snow day after day constantly. And it was just too exhausting. We were getting lost. We were getting soaked all the time. And we were worried about dying basically.
Yeah.
Cause it's not we were there in early mid-February, which is not a really normal time to be hiking there. Mm-hmm. We didn't see anybody for weeks, months straight. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, because people normally start the AT in March or April?
Yeah, an early start date would be March 1st, and then I'd say the bubble, which is what you call the group of hikers that are usually hiking together, and the kind of the biggest concentration of hikers would usually start early April, mid-April.
Yeah.
So we were good 3.5 months ahead of that,
Okay.
Yeah. So when we got up to mid-Pennsylvania, which is just over the halfway point of the AT, we decided to split up the trails basically into two parts, into the southern section of each and the northern section of each, which in doing research, that's pretty much what anybody who has done the calendar year Triple Crown has done in the past as well. We were really hoping that we could just push through each trail without having to split them in half. But in the end, it was just the pragmatic thing to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think the wisest choice you could have made, because a lot of people obviously make the choice to go through whatever danger that they're facing, and then it ends up poorly a lot of the times. The amount of times I've read the news from something happening in the White Mountains where someone went on a hike in certain conditions that they shouldn't be going, and then then their life flighted out or worse. So
before this I was working on, so we made this podcast for Backpacker Magazine, and before this I was working on a different podcast that Backpacker makes as an intern. And one of the stories that we were producing was a guy in the White Mountains who had with very minimal gear, gotten lost on Mount Adams. And I think it was maybe late March or something, which would have been the time that we would be going through. Not to say that people can't hike in the White Mountains in the winter. One of my good buddies who I met on this trek is a guy named Philip Karsha. on Instagram. He's Finding Philip, and he's hiked all the White Mountains like every month of the year.
Oh, cool.
It's insane. Yeah, he's hiked like every single one of them that's over 4,000 feet in every month.
Wow.
So yeah, he'll be up there like in January, you know, on top of like Mount Washington. But like, you know, most people like it's pretty dangerous. And this one story I was working on for Backpacker like kind of freaked me out a little bit. You know, because we were going through places with a lot of fatigue. And a lot of things working against us. So we tried to just prioritize safety as much as possible.
Did anyone try to convince you guys not to do it?
Not to do the calendar year triple?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people.
Was it family who were worried about you, or was it like friends who doubted you, or was it like, you know, just any other sort of naysayers?
Yeah, it was, I'm trying to think of like an acute example. I think family was like quietly against it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of how it goes sometimes, you know, like before, and I would never blame somebody for like not believing in like, you know, a trek of this magnitude. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think they want to be supportive, but it's really hard when, you know, something is like this intense and this dangerous to be supportive when like, you know, me and Jackson have no experience going into it, you know?
Yeah, right.
But, you know, what I found is, like, over time, most people became, like, more and more supportive. I would say the biggest naysayers came from, unexpectedly, we had, like, a article that came out in late December, like, before we left, which we were interviewed for and stuff, but, like, I didn't think it would come out till, like, mid-April, May, till we were, like, you know, kind of into it. And it came out before we even left, which, you know, like, it is cool. It was like, it helped us like get more followers on social media and stuff. But like, I kind of understand like, you know, an article coming out before we've even done anything, it's going to attract some naysayers, you know?
Of course. Yeah.
A lot of doubters, a lot of people who are just like, you know,
it's like inconceivable to them.
Yeah. Just like, you know, typing from their computer or whatever. Yeah. Like, I don't pay any attention to that, so it doesn't really like bother me or anything. But I understand it. You know?
Well, think about how many people would probably say the same thing to someone like Alex Honnold, the free solo climber. You know, because it's obviously insanely dangerous what he did.
Yeah.
And so there of course would be a lot of doubters, but it's like he did it anyway. He survived, and it's pretty incredible.
I like Alex a lot. I met him one time at Stanford, and I think, you know, I don't have any hypotheses that are like different from other people, but like I genuinely think that his brain is wired differently. Like something in his amygdala is like completely different than anybody else.
I think that he actually had a like a CT scan or whatever, like
fMRI.
To try to detect whatever I guess abnormality there might be in his head. But yeah, because it's like he just doesn't feel fear in a place where any reasonable person would. So it's pretty wild. But honestly, dude, like I was thinking about your guys' accomplishment, and I really think it's at least in a similar capacity to Alex's. It's just in terms of, like you said, the magnitude of it. Like, because you guys are the youngest people to do it, aren't you?
Yeah.
Do you know who like the next what's?
Yeah, I do. So the guy who like inspired me to do it is a dude named Jeff Garmier. His trail name is Legend. And I was actually talking with him a bit yesterday, and he did it when he was like 29, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So you had like almost 10 years.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that age, because I could be off by like 1 or 2 years.
Okay. In the vicinity of that, though.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we were the youngest by a significant amount.
That's freaking wild.
Yeah.
And what were your guys' trail names on the AT?
Yeah. Mine is Buzz Lightyear, and Jackson's Woody.
Yes, exactly. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So when you guys got to the places where there were snowdrifts that kind of derailed you, that's when I believe you went to the Continental Divide.
Exactly.
Correct? And you started in New Mexico.
Yeah, New Mexico border. It's a monument called Crazy Cook, and you know, it's just like in the middle of nowhere, like small border town, like 80 miles north of there. So it's really hard to even like get there. There are like tiny little access roads, dirt roads with, you know, huge potholes and stuff. And you get there and there's not even like a border wall or anything there. It's just like this one monument in the middle of nowhere. And then it's 80 miles between you and the next town. And the big challenge is there's no water in those sections.
And there must be a lot of exposure to sun too, right?
Yeah. Tons of exposure. We were kind of all right because we kind of diverted our plans a bit and decided to walk more at night rather than during the day, and then we'd like set up camp during the day. So we went like kind of nocturnal mode in the desert, which keeps you know, from getting too much exposure, but like it's a huge challenge to stay hydrated and not get heat stroke still.
What would you say was the hardest part of the Continental Divide?
Ooh, it's definitely the hardest trail. I would say that like unequivocally.
Out of all three?
Yeah, I would say so. The AT is hard because it has a lot of ups and downs, and the trail is like very craggy. So it's like, you know, on the East Coast we have very rocky, sort of gnarly mountains, but they're not like high altitude or anything, so you don't deal with any like high altitude sickness or anything like that. The tough thing about the Continental Divide Trail is you're just constantly dealing with like actual wilderness threats. So like in the desert, you got exposure and issues finding water. Once you get up to Colorado, you got tons of snow in the San Juans, and you also have a massive exposure to lightning going over 2-3 mile ridge lines in the summer where there are lightning storms all the time. You get up to Wyoming, and you got bears. You get up to Montana, you still got bears. And I had the biggest challenge for me on the CDT was getting Giardia.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, you had a stomach ache for like a month, or just didn't feel well for like a month, right?
It started out as a stomach ache and then kind of evolved over time to like I was vomiting like 4 or 5 times a day. And like I passed out like multiple times a day for like pretty much a week straight.
But you still like did it slow you guys down significantly? Like were you still on the same track, I guess, in terms of like miles per day?
Yeah, my problem is like I can't really tell when I'm sick, which is like a huge problem for me. Because if I realized that I was actually sick earlier on, I probably would have been able to get antibiotics somehow. But I went like a month with just thinking that I was like tired, you know. And you know, if you just think you're tired, you're gonna tell yourself to just like keep pushing through it.
Yeah.
Eventually, I realized like there's got to be something else going on here, you know.
Yeah, because I read that Jackson asked you if you wanted to go to the urgent care. You said no, but then like you like, you know, hoofed it like later in the day, and you're like, okay, let's just go. And I think a trail angel brought you to the urgent care clinic. If I'm not mistaken.
Did you read that in the LA Times?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a little different.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were entering. Like all news stories, there's like a little bit, of course, a little bit of fluff. But but okay, so basically we're entering the Wind River Range, which is this beautiful section in northwestern Wyoming.
Yeah.
And
it's like near Yellowstone, right?
So Yellowstone is in Yellowstone is like a little bit further away, but this is like 100. I don't quote me on the mileage, but it's close to Yellowstone. Okay. Close to the Tetons. Yeah. Closer to the Tetons than Yellowstone. Yep. So this is like a 150-mile section without any access to road crossings or anything like that. Going into it is like when it's probably had been like 2 weeks since I'd started feeling sick. And we entered first day, like totally fine. You know, I was feeling like a little bit better. And then the next day when I woke up, I was just feeling like shit. And like was kind of vomiting more than I had in the past. We continued like another 10, 15 miles. And then we passed like the last tiny little dirt road that we're going to see for like, you know, 150, whatever, some miles. We go past that. And eventually that's when I have that conversation with Jax of like whether I should go to the urgent care or not. Strange thing happens when you vomit, like you feel a lot better afterwards, right? So I like, you know, being kind of an optimist, just think that I'm going to feel a lot better. We continue. Eventually I'm like, I know that something is going to go wrong if I keep going. So we go back, and the challenge now is to like figure out a way to get out on this tiny little dirt road. Fortunately, in town a couple of days earlier, we had met this wonderful guy who was super knowledgeable of the trails in the area, and just kind of like give him a call on the off chance that he knows where we are. I gave him like one sign that we see, and he's like, yeah, I know exactly where you are. Like, give me an hour and a half. Like, I'll be there. Cause he was hiking like nearby, just fortunately. So he came, gave us a ride. We got into this town Lander, which is where I went to the urgent care. They did a couple tests, and they found out that I had Giardia and then 2 types of E. coli.
Right.
And I think that was probably the kicker, is like I got E. coli as well. And I'm guessing like that's kind of what put me over the edge.
Because Giardia is already miserable in and of itself, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And you think that you speculate that you got it from contaminated water?
I think it was contaminated water because we had been using our water filters for so long at that point, and I hadn't cleaned it in like a fair amount of time. So what happens with filters is they start to get jammed when they get too much kind of gunk in them. And I just hadn't cleaned it in a while. And so what happened is I wasn't able to get any water. So I switched over to using iodine tablets. And I was threading them, doing everything you're supposed to do. But I'm guessing like I just messed up on something. And then iodine, like, it's not as, it's not as proficient for cleaning water as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Can I ask, like, how do you prepare for something like this? You know, like, in terms of your gear, in terms of food and all that stuff, like
yeah.
how do you even? I just like it's like, because you guys were carrying what, like 30-pound bags, something like that, and you would. You go along and, you make sure that you have enough food, water, and you filter a lot. But then, like, even in terms of your clothes, like I was thinking about you guys on the AT, it's like you had to have your winter gear for like the earliest months, but then eventually it gets warmer and you wouldn't want to be carrying around that stuff for that time, like as the seasons change.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think the biggest thing is like you're never done figuring out your gear when you're doing, like, even when you're doing one through hike, you're never done figuring out your gear. But especially because we had to transition from one trail to the other with like totally different conditions, our gear changed all the time. And so we would just try to utilize, like, when we went into a town, we would either like mail something home, or if we didn't need it anymore, or what I did a few times, like with my big jacket, is I would mail it ahead, like 300 miles or something, where another place that I knew that we would be in town, and then reevaluate when I got there if I needed it.
That's so legit.
Yeah, it worked out super well. It would take like a ton of planning to know like that we were going to be in a specific town, and I totally fucked up a few times and like sent it to the wrong place. One time, this was kind of bad. I sent my micro spikes ahead, like 400 miles after the Sierra Nevadas on the PCT. And totally forgot that I'd sent them, and then ended up needing them.
Oh no!
Ended up needing them, and didn't have them. So that was a little bit sketchy. Like, so you make mistakes like that, you know. But you generally just try to carry like everything you need, and then if there's something that I'm like kind of on the border with, I always just carry it because I'd rather have like a couple extra pounds than like get an infection or like not be without micro spikes.
Yeah. So you never made any sort of errors that were like compromising that, you know what I mean?
What do you mean?
Like that, you mail something and you forget about it, but then like you need it so bad that like you're completely screwed.
I think the water filter was the only example, because I had been meaning to like actually replace my water filter for some time, but just like kept avoiding it. And then over time, it started like this one kind of fucked me over a little bit, because I had that water filter for like 4 months, which is like way too long.
Okay. Yeah. I know. I have been like confused as to like how many times can I really use this before it is like
most
done.
Of them, like I was using the Sawyer Squeeze Mini.
Okay,
which is great. It's like a great filter. But I'd use it throughout the winter, and sometimes it like freezes and then thaws, which like totally depletes its value, because if you think about water, when it freezes, it takes up more space, so then it like opens up the like pores that stuff can get through.
And then, exactly. Dang.
And they're super aware of that. It's not like a problem with like Sawyer. It's just like my own fault.
Right? No, exactly. It can be like that with any filter.
Yeah.
What would you say was your favorite part of the Continental Divide?
Probably the Wind River Range, because right after I got sick and finally got some antibiotics, like I started like seeing color again for the first time. Like I didn't realize like colors had been muted for me for like a month straight. And I hadn't like tasted any food. I just like I wasn't having a good time. And then seeing all that beauty in combination with like having your health back, like grows, like you just get such an appreciation, Yeah,
you're like seeing the world through a different, more vivid lens.
Yeah, vivid, like rose tinted glasses, basically. It's awesome. Yeah.
So you guys were able to finish the Continental Divide like in its entirety in one long run, right? Like it wasn't interrupted. Like
no, it was interrupted. We finished it. We finished it in two runs as well. Same as the AT. Yeah.
Okay. So is the Pacific Crest Trail, is that the only one that you did in its entirety? Or did you get derailed? You guys got derailed by fires.
Yeah, we got derailed by fires there.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is why after we finished like everything, we had to go back and do this like tiny section where we got kind of screwed by this one fire.
What part in California?
Yeah, Northern California. So we made it through like Tahoe and the areas where the fires like really screwed people over and like forced them to leave their homes and things like that. But when we got further up near like Dunsmuir, Shasta area, and the town where we ended up finishing is called Etna. When we got up to that area, there was this one spot fire that literally started like right as we were getting there. And because of that, I had to sprint like maybe 5 miles downhill to get away from this fire, which was like one of the scariest experiences all year. But it also meant that we had to come back and do this 40-mile section later, which I was pretty pissed about.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Would you say that fire that whole moment, that whole episode, was that like the scariest part of your entire Triple Crown year?
That's a good question.
Top 3 probably, right?
That's a good question. Do you want me to explain what happened, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were getting into Northern California, and it was kind of around the time that fires had become a problem in the area, but not so bad that we were like paying that close attention, right? If we were paying closer attention, we might have been able to like avoid it. We get to this one road crossing, and I don't think much of it at the time, but going uphill, there's about a 4 mile climb or something to get to the top of this peak. And when I got to the top of the peak, smoke had been building up this whole time and getting a little worse. And I have asthma, so it was like kind of starting to affect me. And then I look over this peak when I get up there, and I see below like literal flames and then a wall of smoke. And then at the same time, I'm getting messages on my satellite phone from Jackson, who's like at that road crossing 4 miles back, telling me that they just closed down this section of trail because the fire had started. So what had happened is right after I had hit that road crossing, that's when they, like the sheriff and the local National Forest Service came in and closed the trail because they had just figured out this fire, probably like only 10, 15 minutes after I had gotten there.
Wow.
So it's just like a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I sprinted down as quickly as I could. At the same time, like recording a few voice memos of like, in case the worst happened, in case like the fire caught up to me. Although I don't even know if that would have been effective. But anyways, I would basically, the point is like I was genuinely worried that, the fire was going to catch up to me. And a couple days later, that whole section of trail was like burned over. So they closed it for like 4 or 5 days. They were able to stop the fire pretty quickly, and the trail reopened like I think 6 or 7 days later. But at that time, we just had some really dumb bad luck, and ended up sprinting away and finally got to the base of the mountain and just like passed out from exhaustion.
Holy crap, dude!
Yeah,
it sounds like you were like walking into the apocalypse, when you just see fire and just like a smoke wall.
It kind of felt like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's on the other side. That's like all you see. It's like, oh my God, dude. Like it sounds
was
like
scary,
from a movie.
Man. It was scary, man. And I think the biggest thing I was able to take away from it is like my adrenaline carried me for like 5 miles to run away from it. Like I ran in high school and, I like put up some pretty good numbers, but I think these are like by far the fastest miles I've ever run, And
you were going with like probably a pretty heavy backpack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So add that weight on you. Your quads must have been burning.
They were burning for like 2 weeks after that, man.
Oh,
like,
my gosh.
2 weeks after that, I could barely walk, and we were still doing like pretty big mileage.
Oh my gosh. So that derailed you guys, but did that mean you had to relocate back to going to the Continental Divide, or just like it just
no,
like,
we just skipped ahead. We just skipped ahead like 40 miles basically.
Oh, I see. Okay,
yeah, because there's
okay.
no between that road crossing and the next road crossing is 40 miles. So we were able to like hitchhike from that trail down into town, and then from town up to the next road crossing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite part about that trail, the PCT?
Ooh, good question. Probably the Northern Cascades up in Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what month were you there at that point?
That must have been late September.
Okay.
Yeah, late September. Northern Cascades in Washington are beautiful. I'll have to show you some pictures, but because it was late fall, all the foliage was changing. It's not quite as beautiful as it is here, in my opinion. But I might be somewhat biased. But like the mountainsides turn completely red, and then these clouds kind of like lie in between mountain peaks, so that they look like a river almost, and it's just spectacular.
So would you say that the hardest part of the trail would have been? What was like the most physically arduous part? Because I've always heard the PCT is harder than the AT. Was that your experience?
No.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I think we had kind of a unique experience because we were doing the AT mostly in winter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in terms of like a physical rugged experience, the AT is probably harder, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, just because there's not as high elevation, but there's so much up and down.
Okay.
I think the best way to think about it is if there's a mountain, the AT will go straight over it and down, whereas the PCT will kind of like skirt around it and find a mountain pass to get over at a lower elevation, whereas the AT will just go straight over whatever mountain there is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I heard that on the PCT there's less, or there's more miles in between, like what would you call them? Like not like rest stops, but
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Like town, like resupplies?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
on average, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. So, yeah, it's not so simple to say, like, one is harder than the other. I think it
Yeah.
kind of depends on what you're optimizing for.
Yeah.
Like, the AT, you're right. There's definitely way more towns, for
yeah,
sure.
so like logistically, it might be easier to do the
Yes.
AT, but physically, it's probably harder than the PCT.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, because like the PCT, there's one stretch through the Sierra Nevadas where there's no like potential place to resupply for like 200 miles, 250 miles, I think it is.
Okay.
Which makes it pretty hard to like plan logistically.
Yeah, and is it at all hard to like, I guess, prepare for bears? To, like when you're camping at night to hang up your food, or did you get used to doing that?
We got pretty used to doing it. We saw like 7 bears throughout the year. Only a couple that were threatening.
Yeah, I wrote about one, so tell me about that one.
Yeah, that was in Washington as well, more like central Washington. And I came around a corner, kind of like a hairpin turn, and standing up right in front of me, like maybe 20 feet ahead of me, was like a mama bear, like on 2 feet, eating berries. It was pretty late in the fall, so she was probably preparing for hibernation, just eating as much as possible.
Yeah.
But looking at that bear, it's striking because it's usually you see them on 4 feet, but seeing it stand up, about 8 feet tall by my estimation.
Yeah. Do you know what kind of bear it was?
It was a brown bear. Yeah.
It was a brown bear.
Yeah.
And brown bears can be threatening and deadly, if I'm not, like compared to black bears, right? Or are they about the same?
Kinda.
Skittish?
They're definitely not as dangerous as grizzly bears. Like,
Yeah.
I was worried about being attacked for sure. I wasn't so worried about it like actually mauling me and eating me.
Okay.
Whereas like a grizzly will do that.
Yeah.
Like grizzlies sometimes mean harm. Like
Yeah.
no doubt about that.
They will like play with you like a meat stick.
Exactly.
Probably, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you see its cubs with it too?
I didn't. So I came around the corner. It was standing up, charged at me immediately, which was the first sign that there are cubs in the area. If it's being like, attacking immediately. I could tell it was a bluff charge though, which means it's just trying to scare you because it was making lots and lots of noise. If a brown bear or a black bear is like trying to kill you, or especially a grizzly, if it's trying to kill you, it will be pretty lethal and pretty stealthy. And make very little noise. And the other clue that you can find is their ears. So if their ears are standing up, it's most likely a bluff charge. Whereas if their ears are back, they're probably trying to kill you as well.
How do you know that? Did you like read about all that like before you went out on the trails?
I had done a lot of research on bears.
Due diligence.
Yeah, because that's like my biggest fear is getting like mauled by a bear.
Yeah.
Because like I can't imagine. Like I think I would feel pretty powerless. B, I would die, and then C, in addition to that, like while dying, you feel like a wimp, because there's nothing you can do.
Right.
And that's like my biggest fear is like dying and feeling like an absolute loser as I'm getting mauled. You know what I mean? Like,
wow, I suck.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
dude, it's funny. Like, I actually had a bear experience.
Really?
I think my first ever sort of like bear encounter in Wyoming in the Tetons.
No way.
In September when you were out like
This
in the
September?
Northwest. Yeah.
Okay, what happened?
And I paddled across, it's called Jenny Lake, like right in the national park. I was with my 2 cousins and we paddled across in our kayak and canoe that we rented and then like went on a little hike.
Yeah.
And before, but I should preface this and say, before we even went out, the outfitter who rented the boats out to us, he's like, just make sure that like you take out your backpack from the canoe or your boats, whatever.
Yeah. Presumably it had like food and stuff in it.
Yeah, like just make sure you bring your backpacks with you if you go on any hike and you beach the boats.
Yeah.
So we did that, and we're coming back, and then like we're on this rock, and then my cousin's like, "Yo, guys, a freaking bear right there!" And it was like you, it was like maybe 20, 30 feet away.
No shit.
And the scary part about seeing a bear too is like always wondering whether there's young around, like cubs around.
Totally.
Because then, that's when they get defensive and hostile.
Yeah.
And then it started walking towards our boats, and we had to basically follow it because like there was only one way for us to leave.
Oh my
but it was
God.
like on the same trail as us.
Oh my God.
And like there's like a bunch of people nearby. They're like watching everything happen.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really see the bear at one point. We're like on this, like we're like right on the coast.
Did it notice? It definitely noticed you. Like, did it look at you?
It probably smelled us, bears. Because I think that they have really powerful scent.
It's also probably somewhat used to like seeing people, I'd imagine, right?
So that's what I was gonna say. But like I couldn't see it for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I hear from like a little ways away from the people who are watching. They're like, dude, the bear is in your boat.
No
I'm like,
shit.
oh shit, dude. I had my camera with me. I really wanted to get a picture of it.
That's a great line. The bear is in the boat.
Yeah. And so, but it was like kind of freaky because we didn't know whether it was going to go away or if it was going to come back towards us or anything. And I know that black bears can be skittish. I think that's what it was. It was like a brown black bear.
Okay.
And eventually, it dashed off into the woods. Our hearts were freaking racing and everything like that. But we dodged that bullet. But dude, yeah, here I am thinking like these bears must be so used to people because there's so many freaking people in the park that they're like overgrown raccoons.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
they're just so accustomed to people and probably like looking for human food and everything like that. So
the problem is, I think those are the bears that often end up having to be killed because eventually they'll just get a little too comfortable, like approaching a human.
Yeah.
And the human will get scared, and then the bear will get scared and like swat the human, not meaning to kill it or anything. But when that happens, like Park Service is pretty much obligated to like hunt down that bear.
Right.
You know.
I know it really blows, and
That's
why it's really important to leave no trace, as you know.
Yeah, that's a good point because it's not actually for like our protection. It's usually for like the wildlife protection.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Was it like hard? Is it hard at all to camp out in nasty conditions and cook your food and everything like that? Like especially after doing 25, 30 miles in a day.
Yeah.
It's like, and then you still have to set up camp at the end, still have to cook. And if it's like raining out, then it's like, oh my God, it's miserable. What was that like for you guys?
Yeah, we actually stopped cooking, which was, I think, a big win for us. Like winter, that was the hardest thing is when we get set up, we'd be like so stoked to finally be in a warm sleeping bag, like finally not be cold and frozen. We had this bag in our backpack that we referred to as the KDAC bag, which means keep dry at all costs. And inside that, we'd have our sleeping bag, our sleeping pad, and a dry set of clothes. And that's what we put on every day when we get to camp, and we'd be so excited about it because it would be so warm. It'd be such like a refuge from the cold and everything outside. But then, in the winter, we'd get in our sleeping bags, we'd be super warm, and then it's like, oh shit, like now we got to cook. And so we get out of our sleeping bags and we, go through the process of cooking and get cold all over again. But it's obviously super important to be, doing that, rehydrating food and getting the calories you need. But it can mentally be super difficult. So come the summer, we decided to just like completely ditch the stove system. And we did what's called cold soaking, which means you rehydrate your food, which is like cold filtered water. So it'd be stuff like quinoa, mashed potatoes, rice, that kind of stuff. But it would be completely cold, which is awesome because you get rid of the stove system. But it's not awesome because you don't have like hot food or anything.
Right.
But it's like pluses and minuses. But for us, it was worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing I wanted to ask is like how. I don't want to call it easy it was, but like how manageable it was to eat enough food every day when you're hiking 25, 30 miles a day. Because I saw that Jackson lost, like 40 pounds? Is that what I saw?
Yeah, I think it was like, 40 pounds sounds right if he said that. I don't know how much he lost, but he definitely lost a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
You didn't lose that much?
So I didn't lose any weight until I got sick, and then I lost like 20 pounds.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, which was like not good.
Right. Because
when that happens, your energy is so depleted. That's the big thing is when you lose too much weight, you start eating at your muscles, kind of. I don't know if you've ever been around like an ultra athlete or like people who are doing like ultra marathons and stuff, but you can kind of tell when people like start to lose that much weight, muscle starts to burn, and sometimes we'd like come across through hikers who were just like burning muscle, and it actually has like a weird smell to it, like kind of like vinegar, and so that's like was our biggest fear was like that we start burning our muscles because then you have no energy and climbing and doing all the things you need to do just becomes so difficult.
Yeah.
And so because of that fear, I would just like eat constantly,
right,
like all the time, every time we stopped without exception. People make fun of me like when we post stuff on the internet because like if we took a video of ourselves where we were stopping, like I would be eating. But that's just because I was so consistent about like every time we stop, I have to eat. Like that's the rule.
Even if you didn't want to.
Even if you don't want to. Like you have to eat something all the time.
Right.
And because of that, I think I was able to keep like a good amount of weight on.
Okay. Dude, I find it hard to eat that many 5,000 calories. I find that hard to eat like if I'm just trying to bulk up at the gym, like you guys were doing it,
By the end, we were doing like 6,000.
Wow, really?
Yeah, yeah.
But you're probably burning
ton. Yeah. Burning a ton.
Was there any point in any of the hikes, any of the trails that you really thought you were going to give up? No. Really gonna stop?
No, definitely not. We actually enjoyed it so much. Like I think in retrospect, it's easy to like view it from different perspectives. Like sometimes I think people view it from like too much of a rose tinted perspective where they're like, oh, that must have been so fun. Like, you know, kind of frolicking in the woods. And like, it's not like that, but it's also not like hell all the time. Like it's really fun, you know?
Right.
You know, it's kind of like, I'm sure, you know, you enjoy like going, you know, in the outdoors or like going to the gym. Like it's something that's hard, but it's like consistently fulfilling, consistently rewarding. You know? Which is why I think like we were able to continue to do it without any thoughts of like stopping. You know?
Yeah, it's a fulfilling challenge. And
Exactly.
You were super committed to it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I think I remember reading you said that you were waking up like every day feeling miserable for a little bit and not looking forward to the day's hiking. Was that when you were experiencing the stomach bug?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was the scariest thing. I still did not want to like stop though. I just like had the prospect in my mind of like, okay, I guess like the next 4 months of my life are going to be like this, which is not an exciting prospect, but like, you know, when you're like committed and like borderline obsessed with something, you know, that's like the thought doesn't really cross your mind to stop, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And like at the very beginning when you guys were on the AT in the winter, was that actually, you know what? I'm going to ask you a different question.
Sure.
What was your favorite part about the AT? Because every time I talk to people who've hiked the AT, they always tell me the same place was their favorite. So I'm curious to know what yours was.
Do people say the White Mountains?
Yeah,
presumably?
every time.
Yeah. You must have hiked a bit in the Whites.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Where's your favorite spot in the Whites?
I think, I don't know if I have a favorite spot,
Okay.
but one of the coolest experiences I had in the Whites was on, what's it called? It's not Cannon Mountain.
Cannon's cool.
Cannon's cool.
Yeah.
I loved that hike.
Yeah.
And I did that in the summertime, and that was a great hike. And I can never remember the name of it. Webster Mountain. And it was the
Webster Cliffs or Webster.
I think it was Webster, Mountain.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And my friend and I camped on the top at night, and I had never done that before.
No
And
way.
I guess it's called cowboy camping, where you just like don't even have a tent or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So we just like hiked to the top, or it was almost the top.
Yeah.
And they just like set down, I think like a tarp, and then our 2 air mattresses and a couple pillows.
Nice, dude.
And it was just so unreal, just laying on top of a mountain, you know, thousands of feet above the ground. I don't know if that's 4,000 feet. The summit of Webster might be.
I think Webster's just under.
Okay. Yeah. But still just like that elevation and just like looking at the stars at night, like totally clear sky.
Yeah.
And right before just seeing like one of the most epic sunsets I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It was just such a magical, special experience. And I've never replicated that since
Dude, you
then.
get such a sick view of the valley from Webster Cliffs.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so that was like one of my favorites. And then just like waking up the next morning and then just like hiking down the rest of it. I'm like, dude, I want to do more of this so bad.
Yeah.
But like none of my friends really like do that anymore.
Okay.
You know, it seems
Gotcha.
like they're not really as much hiker types anymore.
Okay.
But last winter was the first winter I really started hiking in the Whites. And I've never been a skier or snowboarder, which I know is ironic because I grew up in Maine. I've lived here my entire life.
And you said you're a skater growing up too, right?
A skater. Yeah. Well, a skateboarder. And,
but kind of goes hand in hand, no?
Yeah. And so I thought so too.
Yeah.
At least with snowboarding. I've only snowboarded once ever. Okay. But like, even though I don't do those things, you know, all my friends do, my brother does, but I never did. So I hated winter because I never had anything to appreciate about it.
Yeah.
And now I'm like excited for the snow.
Nice,
I'm like,
dude.
I'm just so pumped. I'm like, let's freaking get snow on the ground, snow on the trees. I want to go, you know, like in the mountains because now I've realized that hiking is something that I can do in the winter to sort of stave off the winter effects, and it's something to look forward to now. And it's a fun challenge. So I'm like, okay. And obviously I'm into photography too. So hiking and photography, like in the winter, is just my jam now. So I'm really looking forward.
So did you go out into the Whites last winter at all?
Yeah, so I did Mount Moriah. That was my first 4,000 footer in the winter, and then I did Mount Willie, but I don't think that's a 4,000 footer. But
I don't know Mount Willie.
Really steep and kind of sketchy at one point. I did that with a few friends of mine, and then we like slid down on our butts like almost the whole way down. That was literally like some of the most childlike fun I've ever had in my life.
For sure.
And then I think I just did a couple other smaller hikes like the Boulder Loop but I think Mount Moriah is the only 4,000 footer that I've done in the winter so far.
Nice.
And that was actually like much more manageable than I thought. And there were awesome gray jays at the top that would like, I don't know if you're really allowed to do it because it's like it's not leave no trace friendly, but like people put like little food in their hands and then like go out, you know, like extend their hands. That's and then awesome. Like the birdies come and just like rest on your hand and you have a really killer view of Washington and everything like that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so I know that you did them, you know, on the AT, but you're also like, I'm assuming you probably like the White Mountains too for hiking in general.
Yeah. Love the Whites. Summer before this, I was hiking a bunch up there, and then growing up, I'd done I think it's probably like 10 or 11 4,000 footers. I definitely haven't done all of them.
Yeah.
My buddy and I on the 21st of December, we're gonna try to do this like new kind of track that's like part of the AT that he's been pioneering a bit, called the White Mountain 100, which goes over all the Prezzies, goes over Franconia Ridge, goes over the Kinsmans, goes over Moosilauke. I think it starts in Moosilauke and ends with the Prezzies maybe, but it's like and the Wildcats as well. So it's like all kind of the highlights of the Whites in 100 miles. So we're gonna go do that in like a little over a week.
I was wondering that. Yeah. You said you said that you had a few hikes on the horizon.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one.
That's the big one. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one I'm like most stoked about.
Yeah, and because you're going back to California for college, I'm assuming in January, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How are you feeling now? Like, because you know it's funny meeting you because I'm meeting you at a time where you're like, this is one of the most transformative years of your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And just like physically, like how do you feel and how did you feel when you first got off the trail? Because you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like especially compared to last year.
Yeah, totally. I think last year at this time I was just amping up for this, you know?
Yeah.
I think, is today the first or the second? Today's the first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, today's the day that Jackson and I like moved in together he has a house in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And we moved into his house in New Hampshire for the last like month of preparation. And so we were like totally gearing up. I think we were like still had a lot of shit to figure out, even though we had been planning for like 9 months. Then we've obviously been hiking pretty much the whole year. And so right when we finished, I think I was feeling like a sense of euphoria for a really long time. I kind of went like social media and like any type of media and even texting, calling my friends dark for like the last 2 months of the trek. Like I didn't really talk to anybody outside of like my really close circle for that time period. And so I think like I jumped back into that like very quickly. And it was like quite overwhelming, at first. I was like very overstimulated in any social setting for like at least the first week and a half after. And, I went back to, Stanford where I go to school just to like visit some friends for a week or so. And that was like one of the most overwhelming experiences of my life because, I was like very excited to see my friends. And I think my friends were like also very excited to see me. They've been like following what we've been doing pretty closely. And it was like so wonderful, but also so overwhelming. Like that's one thing I think people that I didn't really consider is that, a lot of this trek was like based in solitude. We went like months and months without really seeing anybody except for each other, which is like a beautiful experience. But like readjusting is a bit of a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is like rebuilding my social battery a little bit. And then also like realizing the value of, taking space for myself as well.
Yeah.
And like just going on walks, going on runs. Like now I'm directing most of my, like physical energy cause I'm very antsy all the time, towards running,
Yep.
Which has been very, very helpful as well. So it's like definitely an adjustment back, but I think, part of it is like, I don't fully want to adjust back, if that makes sense. I want to like maintain that sense of self that you kind of build when you're in solitude for that long.
Yeah. Mm. Do you feel physically good too?
Yeah. I feel physically very like healthier than I've ever felt. Yeah.
I was like something like that seems like it could either really put like a ton of wear and tear on your body and you might have like achy joints or achy parts of your body, you're sore, or you feel like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, like Hercules
I think it's
style.
like both, oddly, because I'm sure that like 10 years, like I'm probably going to have, back and knee issues before like anybody else because like, I just put so much wear and tear on them like this year and I still put I'm going to put more wear and tear on them. I have no like plan to stop that, like
ironically it must have been actually harder at the beginning. Right?
It was super hard at the beginning.
Dude, I remember, so I did the it's called the Pemmy Loop in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I've done the Pemmy.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. So you know what it's like. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, so I did over 3 days. Mm-hmm. And I remember at the end of the third day, like when I got back home, getting out of my car and my legs, dude.
Where'd you feel it the most? Like,
I just, you mean specifically in my legs?
Uh-huh.
I feel like it was my upper legs, like my quads area, if I'm not mistaken. And it just felt like my legs aged like 60 years, dude. It was brutal, but it's like a strengthening process. But I got out of the car feeling like, someone get me a wheelchair, help. And here you guys are doing like, 25, is that what you average? Like 25, 30 miles a day? Yeah. And it's like, that destroyed me after 3 days. And you guys just like,
I think training is always a weird thing because like you feel weaker until you feel a lot stronger, you don't realize your progress until you take a step back. But I think it's a similar thing with through hiking where like, you just get used to it over time, but you still have those days where it's like, it's very painful. Like in the White Mountains, I think I asked you that question because where I feel it like the most is in my knees. Okay. Especially like coming down, like after the Prezi Traverse, like coming down Adams, for example, it's so steep and you're putting so much pressure on your knees. At a certain point, they just turn to like jelly basically. Yeah. And that's when people get injured usually. Yeah. But that's when it's like very helpful to have trained a lot because you can kind of like reform where you're stepping so that your other muscles are working. Like taking, like walking in a very weird way, climbing in a very weird way, but where you're putting pressure on like different joints and different muscles because like your knee joints are just like so tired. Yeah.
I think you're right about that. I think it was like that actually for me. Like,
dude, the whites are killer for your knees. Like, they're killer.
Dude, oh my God. The amount of times I have descended a mountain and just being like, why am I still doing this without hiking poles? Like, I never would use hiking poles. Really? I like really last winter was the first time I was using hiking poles, but it's like, you need them, I feel like, really bad in the winter.
Yeah. It can be tough in the whites, though, because sometimes I think it's like it's really important to be able to, like, climb, with, like, all four of your limbs, especially, like, if it's icy and stuff. So I actually didn't use hiking poles in the whites for that reason because I was super worried about, like, tripping and injuring. Mm-hmm. But, it was also very icy, so I guess it just depends.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So, like...
You got any plans for hiking? Like where you're gonna hike? Where you're gonna hike this winter?
I still haven't made my itinerary. Okay. I have a bunch of saved hikes in my just in my All Trails app. But I haven't really decided yet. And I will say it is kind of tough because like I said, a lot of my friends don't really seem like they hike anymore, especially in the winter. But like my friends were the reason I got into hiking. Yeah. So. It's kind of so I feel like I'm like doing the solo endeavor all the time. And so like, I want to do more 4,000 footers, but I'm not going to lie. Like I still am like in the winter, but I am like reluctant to do that stuff on my own, even though I like to do a lot of things by myself. Yeah. Like I've gone way more into biking this year and I did that every single time alone. Yeah. But like hiking, it just feels uniquely more dangerous. And so I'm like, do I really want to go in the winter, with, like by myself and take that risk because it just seems sketchy. I don't know.
The whites can be super sketchy. Yeah, I think I do feel similarly. Yeah,
it's just like nice having someone else. Like
and even though like theoretically, like if there's like because I think about this a lot as well. Like when I was hiking with Jackson, like there's things that just psychologically feel safer. Even if there's not actually like an extra safety element that's added by like a second person being there, like an avalanche, for example, like a second person isn't going to do shit unless they don't get hit by the avalanche, which is like unlikely if you're hiking together. It's like likely that you're both going to get covered by it. But just having like a second person there, I think it's just psychological, which is like very valuable in and of itself.
Right, exactly, and it's just nice, having that sort of like you said, like a psychological sort of comfort about it, I guess, like. One of the reasons why I like to hike in the winter is because there's not really a lot of people out versus like, dude, you go to any trailhead in the White Mountains, like from spring to the end of fall, and every single parking lot is jam packed full. Yeah. And I'm like, dude,
the secret is out.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. It's like cat's out of the bag now. And I'm like, I want to go and do all these hikes, but dude, I kind of can't stand how many people are out, even though I'm really glad that there's that many people out enjoying nature. Because I do wish more people would go out to enjoy nature because it's just good for you. Yeah. But now I realize that it's like, hiking is what so many people do now that like you can't even go to a trailhead parking lot without there being without it, like looking like it's a Van Halen concert with like the amount of cars that are there. You know what I mean? So
I think there are ways to combat it because like overall it's a good thing, right? Like I generally think that like the more people that enjoy the outdoors is a positive thing because it, you know, especially thinking about like climate change policy and, you know, like where we need to be focusing our energy politically. Yeah. I think, you know, people only start to think about like climate change and any climate issues when they're exposed and they appreciate nature. Right. So I think overall it's like a really good thing, but I also like, I genuinely like totally understand what you're saying. Cause I selfishly like, I don't want to see people when I'm hiking either, or like when I'm climbing, like anything. I don't want to. Yeah. I want to be experiencing that myself.
You want the solitude. Feel like this nature is like it's all, like I'm the only one here. This is my little playground.
Yeah, but I think like the outdoors are so grand. Like there are always going to be places that are like you can find solitude. You know.
Well, and that's why, like I said, that's why I started to enjoy it more in the wintertime because there's less people. But now like if I actually sort of enjoy seeing other people on the trail in the winter because it just feels higher risk. So I'm like, oh, well, at least like this guy is on the trail or this girl is on the trail. Because if I like, you know, if I end up on the side of the trail injured or something like that, and I
dude, also that means that if there's a lot of snow, it's going to be like tracked out. Yes. And it's so much easier when it's tracked out.
Dude, oh my God. Because I was hiking on like Sundays and Mondays last winter. And like every single hike I went on, it was already packed down. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, that's perfect timing. Because you already get that whole weekend crowd is already like blazed it for you. The only downside is if it's super tracked out and then it's so cold that it ices over. Yeah. That can be pretty rough.
Yeah. But micro spikes definitely were like a total game changer for me last year. Like it was like the first time I had ever really, like I said, it was like the first time I'd ever really done winter hiking. Yeah. And I realized winter hiking is actually kind of easier than in the summer because there's not like all those like divots, all those you know like crevices, they're all filled in with the snow. Yeah. Right. So there's like less chance of twisting your ankle or anything.
Dude, I think one of the most fun experiences this year was hiking down Moosilauke, which is like the first 4,000 footer you hit in the Whites on the AT. Yeah. It was like the first weekend that people were really out and hiking. So like snow tracked down for the first time, which was awesome. Coming down, because of the way the AT works, you come down to the trailhead where most people hike up. So it's like very tracked out. And it essentially was like flat and like very icy and slippery. So we kind of just like slid down the entire mountain. But either like on our butts or like kind of running down it on our feet. And it was like so much fun. We probably got down like the 4 miles in like less than an hour because we were just like absolutely booking it. And it was so fun.
That's what I mean. Like the being able to do like a butt slide on the way down.
Dude, it's a good time. Yeah.
Were there like a lot of, I think that there's like kind of sketchier parts though, like in the Whites on the AT, aren't there? Like, did you feel that sketched out when you were like, in a couple different parts? I just can't remember what parts.
It was a little sketchy at certain parts because of the snow, I would say. I feel pretty comfortable in the Whites just like because I've grown up around here. Yeah. I'm trying to think of the most sketchy parts. Probably going up Wildcat. I think you hit Wildcat D first. And I don't know if you've done any of the Wildcats, but I would say it's the closest thing to like scrambling that I've experienced up in that area. Because it's like the trail will be like it'll be like a 40-foot boulder and like, you know, maybe a tree on the side that you can kind of like scramble up. And because it was very icy, like there's huge risk of like falling down that. Okay. So it's like that kind of stuff. But those falls themselves would probably have been like maximum 10, 15 feet or something, which is still sketchy. Yeah. But so I'd say that was the number one, and then number two would be storms. Like if you hit a storm when you're like above tree line, super scary.
Oh my God, dude! I would not want to experience that. Did you guys experience stuff like that?
We hit a pretty decent weather window. We had a small storm when we were up on Franconia Ridge, which is like a spectacular area. So I was kind of just bummed that we didn't get like those views because it was kind of socked in. Yeah. And then a small storm when we were on Mount Washington.
Oh, yeah, because Franconia is sick.
Franconia is sick,
The ridge there.
Yeah, from like Lafayette. I think Lafayette's the best view in my opinion because you can see the mountain ahead of you and then you can see the Prezzies as well. Yeah. Love that. And then we hit a small storm on the White Mountains as well. But at this point, I think our level of like comfort with danger was like we were more and more comfortable in the mountains. You know? Okay. Yeah. And the other thing is like it's all like relative, you know. Like we had experiences where we were like so cold and wet that we were like very worried about hypothermia.
I was wondering that. Yeah. If you had any bouts with that.
Yeah, we had some really close calls. Yeah. And so like that kind of thing is like way scarier to me than like just a snowstorm coming in, you know.
Right, because I believe that I read about you guys like, or maybe you in particular, feeling kind of delirious from like onset hypothermia.
Yeah, it was both of us. So this was early on in the Smoky Mountains. Okay. It was mostly induced by dehydration. But because we were so dehydrated, basically what happened is when we entered the Smokies, it was a 4-day stretch. And we got hit with a different snowstorm every single day. And the water sources that we were coming across were all frozen. It was it was between like 0 and 5 degrees pretty much every day consistently. And then at night it would dip below freezing or dip below 0. Which was sketchy because we only had 0-degree sleeping bags.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were like, trying to hike as much as possible to stay pretty warm, and just getting more and more dehydrated because every time we stopped to like boil snow, we'd like basically freeze while we were doing that.
Yeah.
So we just stopped. We didn't stop anymore for snow to boil or anything.
Okay.
And eventually we just got so dehydrated that we became like pretty delirious.
Oh my gosh.
And then we were like freezing, very cold. Both of us started hallucinating a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And this was at the end of the stretch of the Smoky Mountains. So we just like kept going. And finally we got to, you descend down to like 2,000 feet, and that's where you hit a town.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of town, did you guys rely completely on camping? Like, did you tent out like the entire time, or did you stay in any hostels?
No, we stayed in hostels along the AT.
Okay.
Yeah. The AT has a bunch of hostels. Well, unfortunately, because we were doing it so early, a lot of them were closed. So we couldn't like utilize them as much as we wanted to. But like when they were open, yeah, we stayed in I don't know the number, but we stayed in hostels like to resupply and things like that when we could.
Yeah, and because it was sorry, I'm just gonna make an adjustment. Because it was still kind of a year of COVID, still very much in the pandemic. Did you guys see other hikers often, like in those hostels? Was
Not
there anyone
really.
else?
No, that was the other reason we tried to like limit staying in hostels and stuff, was just to like limit exposure and that kind of thing. Like at the beginning of this, like, it was still like pretty sketchy situation with COVID. So,
right.
And we wanted to be as safe as possible. And like, I think it was like, a very safe thing to be doing generally, because we saw like way less people on average than I would if I, was like just living at home or something.
Yeah.
We go days without seeing a single soul.
Right.
So we didn't see that many hikers in the beginning. By the time like April, May rolled around, like people were through hiking a bunch this year. So like on the PCT, we were kind of hiking with the bubble for a bit, and we saw a ton of people. But at that point, we're all like vaccinated and stuff too.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering if any hostels were closed too.
Yeah, I don't know if any that were closed this year still. I know 2020, like when the pandemic was raging. Not that it's not raging right now.
Yeah.
My mom works for the CDC and
in Maine, like
yeah,
Maine
yeah.
CDC.
Yeah, Maine CDC.
Wow, okay.
And I don't know. I've just been reading a bit about it. Apparently, there's like more new cases in Maine right now than there has been like the entire pandemic.
Yeah.
But anyways, for a while in the summer, I think things were like calmed down a little bit.
Yeah.
And tons of people were hiking.
Right.
Tons and tons of people were hiking.
Wow. Okay. Dude, honestly, it sounds so rad to just like have that solitude and not see like a soul for a while. The only experience I've ever had like that similar is like on the Allagash River here in Maine, where you just like, you do not see people. Yeah. You only see each other and then moose.
Yeah. When were you on the Allagash?
Well, my friends and I did it for 4 years in a row. So I think it was like 2014 to 2018 or something like that. 2013 to 2017.
Dude, that's awesome.
And it's really cool. Yeah. And it's like one of the most unique experiences you can have, especially in Maine, because there's like that kind of remoteness.
I really want to do it. What was the permit system like? Was it hard? Like, did you have to get a permit to do it?
Not at all.
Okay.
You just have to get someone to basically like a chauffeur basically to drive your car from like after you park it down to where you end up.
Okay, yeah.
And so we did it over 5 days each year. So it does take a while to do.
Uh-huh.
And so but I don't think that we needed a permit. Maybe we needed a permit, but if anything, I think we just really had to pay for the camping sites. That like go along.
Is it like
river.
Designated sites that you like sign up for? Like, how does that work?
You don't like reserve. I don't think you really reserve
Yeah.
individual camping sites, but you just like pay a certain amount for however many nights you're going to be camping, and then like whatever campsite you end up at, like that's
so fun.
it.
It sounds so fun.
It's truly one of the most special experiences I've ever had, and I'm already pumped to do it again. But we haven't done it in a few years now, which is kind of a bummer. We all want to do it again, but it's just so remote that it's like, dude. And I don't know if you felt this way. I'm sure you guys did plenty, but it's like, if I get hurt right now, if something happens that could like seriously imperil my life or whatever, that's like, I am so screwed. Like there's no one coming to help me. There's no one coming to help my friends, because you're just so remote. I know that you guys have you guys use satellite phones.
Yeah.
So, like, can you at least contact emergency services?
You can, but
like
I mean, you're still just as far away, you know?
Right.
Like,
they still have to, like, fly a helicopter into wherever it is because it's so remote.
Yeah, and Garmin, which has an office here in Yarmouth, they were, like, super cool to us. They offered us, like, free satellite phones before we left.
Wow, really?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd already bought one. I was so pissed.
Oh, no,
I was like,
really?
why didn't I just wait a week? But I had no idea they were going to offer us one.
God, I love when that happens.
But then they did give us, like, a free subscription. So, like, we could send, like, unlimited messages to, like, our families, which is super cool.
Oh, nice.
Because,
Okay.
like, stretches like the Wind River Range or the Sierras, like, stretches we've talked about, like, have no service. And it's, like, really awesome to just, like, send a text and say, like, we're still safe or whatever. But, yeah, so we could use those, like, in really remote areas. But it's still going to take a long time to, like, get, help or anything. But so you definitely have that feeling of, we're out here and, if something happens that's bad enough to be time dependent, like, you could be in a lot of trouble. I still, though, think it is a huge, like, safety crutch to have those satellite phones because, I just think about, like, adventures that I've read about, like, in past years who having, like, no security going out into the wilderness. And I think because of that reason, like, adventure like today is just inherently going to be a little less pure than it was, like, 100 years ago or so.
Yeah.
But I also think, like, it's important not to, like, rely too much on the fact that you have a satellite phone because then you'll be less safe. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't think, like, oh, because I have the satellite phone, I can make this risky decision. Like, you should act like you don't have any security. And then if something really happens that's out of your control, like, at least you have that.
I feel like that kind of, naive mentality or outlook is what definitely gets people into trouble a lot. Like, oh, I still have this thing. So It's like, dude, well, you could be in the wrong situation and help might not be available even though you think it is.
I also think it's, like, the respectful thing to do for, like, search and rescue services.
Yes,
because those people put themselves at risk to help other people,
Yep.
And it's like, and which, they choose to do that, obviously, but you shouldn't, like, force somebody to be in that position unless it's absolutely necessary.
Right.
I know some people on the Pemmy SAR, and I think that's the biggest thing that they get, like, really upset with hikers and people who are climbing about is, like, that they just rely on the fact that search and rescue will come get them, and search and rescue is, like, amazing there, and they will do it, but it's like, it's putting a huge burden on people to do that in situations that could have been avoided.
Yeah, like, you're literally subjecting someone else to danger just because of your sort of own carelessness.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude. I remember reading, I think it was just last year that there was a couple hikers who I think went up to Franconia and they weren't wearing boots. They were wearing, like, running sneakers or something like that.
Okay.
And then one of them ended up, like, their sneaker fell off and then they were, like, hiking, like, down in bare feet and stuff like that. Started to feel a lot of numbness. Yeah.
Whoa.
And they had to get life flighted out. But it's like, dude, that was a very sort of naive and careless mistake.
That's crazy.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it blew my mind.
Were they wearing running shoes or trail runners?
Like trail runners, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like in the winter.
Oof. I also wear trail runners in the winter.
Really?
So, yeah.
Oh, man, maybe there's something I don't know.
Yeah, no, they are really good. Trail runners are great in the winter. I think the big complaint that people have about boots is, like, they're pretty heavy. And then also transitioning from trail runners back to boots is really hard.
Okay.
Like, it's very difficult to make that adjustment just because the way, like, you walk slightly differently.
Okay.
But trail runners can basically be just as boots if you have really good gaiters.
Okay.
So as long as you have gaiters and your trail runners are waterproof, like, you should be chilling.
Yeah.
But, like, plenty of people just go out with, like, their New Balance running shoes.
Yeah.
And
that's what it sounded like, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Dude, so do I still have a good amount of time with you?
Sure. Yeah, I should probably get going in, like, the next 20 minutes or so.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
What was the most, out of all three trails, what was the most remote area, if you can remember?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because, like, the 100-mile wilderness in Maine sounds pretty, like, rugged and extreme, but there's probably longer stretches in other.
The Hundo's pretty remote. I think it does now have, like, some access points that people are able to, like, there are dirt roads in the Hundo now, whereas there used to not be. Okay. Like, back when, like, I don't know if you've ever read The Maine Woods by Thoreau.
No, I have not.
You'd love it. Yeah, I think you should check it out.
I read his book Walking and then Walden.
Nice. But yeah, a lot of the area he talks about that is, like, what's now the 100-mile wilderness. Okay. And so, like, back then it was, like, way more remote than it is now. It's still pretty remote, but I would say the longest stretch on any of these trails would be the Sierra Nevadas in California. Really? Yeah, it's very, very remote. And, like, the access points to get out of there are all over, like, 13,000 foot mountains. So it's pretty tough to get out of there.
Did it feel sketchy at at any point? You're like, oh man, this is super remote. Like we are out here, dude.
Yeah, I think the only times it felt sketchy were like a few river crossings that were pretty high, because those can be a little dangerous. Fortunately, it was like, well, fortunately and unfortunately, it was a pretty low snow year this past year in the Sierras.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So that means like the rivers were not rushing as much as they normally would be.
Okay.
But I had one that was like, it was pretty sketchy. It was like up to my like waist and pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then I also had a bear encounter in the Sierras.
Was that the different bear?
Different bear encounter.
Oh yeah, because you guys had 7 bear encounters. Is that what you said?
Yeah. That was I think that was the second one. And it was similar kind of thing where like the bear was clearly pretty accustomed to like seeing people. And you also in the Sierras you get JMT hikers, John Muir Trail hikers, who are doing like a 200-mile trail and are somewhat less experienced, I would say.
Yeah.
They're super, sometimes super rugged, but sometimes less experienced and don't necessarily do a great job like hanging their bear food.
Yeah.
And so there's just like one area where I saw this bear where I guess people had not really hung their food properly multiple times, and the bear just got used to like coming to that area and trying to find food.
That's what I mean. The oversized raccoons, dude.
Yeah,
they know
exactly. even though this is like in the middle of a super remote stretch, you know. Yeah, so it ended up being fine, but the bear was like, it was similar kind of thing you were talking about. It was like in the campsite and then kind of like on the trail looking for people and stuff.
Were there any times you couldn't hang up your food for just to protect from bears?
Yeah, so we didn't always hang up our food. Like it's not like through the winter we didn't always do it. You know?
Because you didn't have to worry as much if they're hibernating. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And then also like, I would say hanging food is a very valid way to do it. There are also like, you don't necessarily always need to hang it. Sometimes you can just like bury your food or put it 60 feet away. Like hanging it in all cases is not totally necessary. And then like in the desert, like you're not gonna hang food. You're just gonna put it away from your.
I know.
There's no way to hang it.
Yeah,
like,
what are you gonna do?
You're just gonna put it as far away from your camp as you can.
Okay.
And there's nothing more you can do.
And are bears the number one, I guess, sort of threat in the wild in terms of wildlife? Because we were talking about earlier, if something happens in a super remote place. Then we're screwed. And so here I am thinking like, in New Mexico in the desert, I wasn't sure if there were like really deadly snakes or spiders or anything like that could,
that's a good
poison
question.
you.
I think it is somewhat of like a subjective question. So like, I don't know if I would be able to say with certainty that like bears or snakes are the sketchiest. I think it probably just depends on like the area.
Okay.
I didn't really have too many issues with snakes in New Mexico. The only issue I had with the snake was in Southern California.
Okay.
Pretty close to the Mexican border where I almost actually me and Jackson both almost stepped on a rattlesnake. Yeah. And rattlers like most of the time will kind of give you a heads up when you're getting close to them.
They'll hiss at you. They'll do that. They'll rattle at you.
They'll rattle at you. Yeah. And that happened 1 or 2 times, but the one that we both almost stepped on didn't rattle at us until we were like, about to step on it.
Yeah.
Like literally our foot was in the air about to step on it. And thank God we noticed it, but they don't necessarily give you like as much of a warning as you like see on a TV show, Yeah. So I came really close to stepping on that one. It was like very scary because they have a lot of venom.
Right. That's what I was wondering. I was like, dude, if you get bit by a rattlesnake when you're like in the desert,
you're screwed. You're screwed
because you have like 45 minutes for it to get like whatever extracted from you.
Yeah. So if you're like more than 10 miles away from somewhere, like you're kind of screwed with a rattlesnake bite.
Right.
Yeah.
Dang, so sketchy, dude.
Yeah. That actually, now that I think about it, might be like my bigger fear than like a bear attack.
Yeah, especially when you're in just like such a remote place.
Yeah.
Had you ever been to the desert before going out there? Like, you're from Maine. You've lived in Maine your whole life.
I've been to the desert of Maine in Freeport. Have you ever been there?
I went there for my first time last winter for like this photo shoot.
Dude, it's a weird place.
It is a really weird place.
Yeah.
But it's like, I've lived in Maine my whole life, and I'm so accustomed to this kind of terrain and forest and everything like that. But I've always been drawn to the West,
really?
Like to the mountains and the desert and like, just like all the different recreational things you can do out there. It's just different. And I want to just spend more time out West, so hearing your story and like being on all these trails, I'm like, damn, dude, I want to do that so bad.
I think the West is like a very, very unique place.
Yeah.
I really like, I don't know if you've ever read Desert Solitaire, Edward Abbey. I think it's like very poignant description of the desert, because it's a very one way to put it, I would say, is like lonely, and then the other way would be just like intense solitude.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain type of like I think solitude that comes from looking in every direction and not seeing anything, which is not something we would ever really experience, like being from Maine, you know, except maybe like out on the ocean. But yeah, it is wild, and I loved it for like a short period of time. I think it sort of made me uncomfortable after quite some time. You know, it felt like a different planet to me. But that said, like, you know, I'm definitely itching to get back out to like New Mexico at some point, or like even Southern California at some point as well.
It's just so different, dude.
It's so different. Yeah.
But that's why I like it.
And it's difficult to conceive. Like, it's difficult to conceive the idea that you can't see anything for miles and that you're just looking at sand for like 40 miles in every direction.
Like the vastness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that's why it must have felt easy to feel like there must have been like some monotonous days, right?
Sure.
Where you're
in the desert for sure.
Yeah. Like
definitely
nothing's changing.
Days.
And the trippy thing about that, like that terrain too, is like, because everything is so massive and vast, it's like you can go, you know, you can make all this progress with your distance and stuff like that, but you feel like the landscapes around you, it's not changing.
Yeah.
It's like, did I even make any progress? Because I'm not seeing any change. Versus when you're on the Pemmy and you're like, you know, you get done the first third, you're like, oh, dude, I was just there.
Yeah.
The second third, you're like, oh, I was just there. But you're in the desert or these huge, vast landscapes. You're like, dude, I don't feel like we've made any headway at all.
Dude, I think the word trippy is like very, very poignant there. And I think that's like that is something that can happen where, you know, you're almost at the end of a day and you realize like, wow, like, I don't even know if I'm in a different place than I was when I woke up this morning. Like, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. You know, it's like a very crazy deal. That's why it's very important to just like stay very hydrated in the desert.
Yeah.
In the desert. Because you're already like kind of tripping out over like reality.
Everything else. Yeah. It sounds like you're just like entering another dimension. Yeah. And it's like, just like such a trip. I also wanted to ask you, was this your first time growing out your beard to that extreme?
Yeah, I grew it out
you're
for like
you're a lot more clean shaven right now.
Yeah. And you see, I don't know if you saw any of the pictures from like, I had like a huge beard.
Yeah. You look a little different now.
Yeah. I know I lose like probably 15 years when I shave that.
Like that's why I keep mine around. I can't have people thinking I'm 16.
Yeah, exactly. I look a little older now, but right when I did shave, I looked 16. Like, it was insane. Yeah. I lost like 20 years very quickly.
Yeah.
I started getting ID'd again, like going out.
Oh, really? Yeah. Did you have to like maintain it and everything on the trails?
No, I didn't maintain it at all. I like would wash it in rivers here and there, but like, you know, I didn't like brush it or anything like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I grew it out for the first 6 months of the trek.
Okay.
And then it started getting like a bit itchy or not itchy, just like very hot and sweaty when summer rolled around. Yeah. And like my dream was to go out for the entire 10-month trek. But it just wasn't really practical in like the heat of July and August. I was sweating so much. Yeah. And it was uncomfortable, you know? Right. I wish I could have done it, but 6 months, like, it also kind of like plateaued in terms of growth. Yeah. So like first 4 or 5 months, it's like growing very consistently. Every month you notice a difference. And then like the last 2 months or so, it didn't really grow that much, you know? Okay. So I don't know if it even would have grown longer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you feel this way, but when I am, you know, enjoying the outdoors for, you know, days at a time, whether it's like on the Allagash for 5 days or like the Pemmy for 3, like one of my favorite parts is actually, well, there's a couple different parts. One is like not even seeing my reflection ever. Like I like that. Like I don't have to be aware of what I look like, what my appearance is. Yeah. I'm just like totally embracing this environment around me. So I don't know if you felt that way. And I also just really, really, really appreciate the digital detox of it all, like the unplugging from it all. Was that ever hard for you? Like unplugging from everything? Like, did you ever feel like you were missing out on things or? I think
a little bit at the beginning, but you know, like
homesickness.
I didn't really get homesick too much. I definitely got sick, or I got I guess the way to put it would be like I thirsted for like social interaction a bit, you know, and I miss my family for sure, but I don't know if I got like specifically homesick.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely can relate. I think one of the things that I realize is like how quickly humans can become accustomed to like any form of living. You know, like we have basic needs that we have to fulfill, like eating, sleeping, staying warm. But beyond that, like I really think, you know, humans can adjust to like any circumstance, you know?
Yeah.
And for us, it wasn't that difficult to adjust to going a week without seeing anybody, or like going a week without having like hot food, or going a week without like, you know, talking to somebody on the phone. Like,
Yeah.
it just became like a new normal. And it actually like we became very happy because of that too, you know.
Yeah.
It's all about like expectations, you know. Like if I right now, after being back sort of in like normal society for like 2 or 3 weeks, like immediately went back to just not talking to anybody for a week, like I would probably feel this huge hole, you know what I mean? But because because I just came from you know, a totally different reality.
Yeah.
But over time you just start to get used to it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever like stopped seeing my reflection, because every day, like I made it a rule, like I would take a selfie every day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I want to do something with it. I want to like compile it and like see like how we like kind of changed,
Some
like
kind of
got more
collage.
dirty. Yeah, something like that. So
right.
I would see my reflection once a day. Because
Okay.
Of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and actually, it's funny. Like in terms of hygiene, did you guys? Well, first of all, I want to ask, like, were there any places that you guys ever stopped on any of the trails where someone's like, "Dude, you need to take a shower,
Yeah.
man. Like, you stink. Like, get out of this laundromat, you hippie."
It definitely happened. Luckily, most of the towns that we went through are like used to seeing like through hikers.
Yeah.
And it's like a huge part of most of these towns' economies. Too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Probably the culture.
Yeah, and the culture too. Like a lot of them are big hiking areas. Most of them are just like very rural and, you know, somewhat poor towns that like rely on the through hiking community for like parts of their economy.
Yeah.
Especially
right.
on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we definitely like started to smell pretty bad. Like, no doubt about it. Yeah, and we also just like, you look very dirty. Like there's a certain amount of dirt buildup where even after taking a shower, you still have dirt on.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like a permanent residue. Almost.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it took me like 3 or 4 showers after finishing to like actually look somewhat normal again.
Yeah.
You know?
I kind of like it. Like, did you guys embrace it? Like, it kind of
we
it's
totally
just nice
embraced
to
it.
feel dirty for a little bit.
It's the only thing you can do, because if you don't embrace it, it's going to be like constantly infuriating. Like,
Yeah.
Parts of you are going to be dirty at all times, you know? Or parts of you are just going to be like uncomfortable at all times. You know, like I had like wet like feet for like probably upwards of like 6 months, you know?
Wow.
Like hours and hours a day, you know? Only at night would my feet like ever actually be dry. Even
and you didn't have any your feet were wet for like 6 months. But
Yeah.
did you never experience any
trench foot?
Yeah, trench foot.
Yeah, I got close to it for sure. I'll show you some. I'll be willing to show you some pictures if you want.
I would check
I don't
them
know
out.
if you want to see them.
Are they like
your question.
porous?
Yeah, they're porous and they're like white to the point where it's like dead skin.
Yes.
Kinda.
Yeah.
I mean, we had like really good gear. Like it's not a matter of like, you know, we had like Gore-Tex boots, like really awesome. Shoes, things like that. But at a certain point, like you just get wet,
Right.
You know? Like it's
Then you just
gonna
embrace
happen.
it.
Yeah,
exactly. You
Try
have
to stay dry as long as possible, I'd say, is important. But like over time, it's just once you hit like that threshold of being wet, you just gotta stop running from
Yeah.
it. You know.
You just have to be able to embrace the discomfort of it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
for a little bit.
Exactly.
And that actually reminds me. So like, was it hard to shower out in the wild, especially in the wintertime?
Was it hard to shower? What do you mean?
Like, you know, you're showering when it's freezing outside, right? And so it's like, it's probably really uncomfortable. You don't have a nice hot shower to go to at the end of your winter day hike. You know
Yeah,
what I
so
mean?
we only really shower like when we hit a hostel.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
we'd shower like once every 2 weeks or something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Usually they would be hot. Like usually we'd find a hot shower. We did have this experience like 2 or 3 times on the AT where we like got somewhere. We're like super stoked to take a shower and just be like freezing cold, like freezing cold water.
Right.
It didn't bother me too much because I had done a ton of cold exposure in preparation for this, to like try to build up a little bit of just ability to spend time in the cold.
Yeah.
But my buddy Jackson's from Florida, and like, you know, he's an absolute trooper. But I think like the first few weeks of like being in the snow and cold were like a huge awakening for you know, he's like grown up in the heat, you know, like what he did is like way more impressive to me than what I did, because I'm used to it, you know.
Right.
And then we hit this like after the Smoky Mountains, actually we hit this tiny little hostel, and yeah, we went to like take a shower and it's just like freezing cold. It's like this whole time we've been like so cold, like just so excited to take this like shower.
Yeah,
you know? We're like, that's like, oh, when we get there, we're gonna take the shower.
Yeah.
Then we get there and it's like freezing cold.
Oh,
Like it's colder than the snow outside.
I feel cold just hearing you
Yeah,
say it.
I think we both almost like broke down, like just
Yeah,
in tears.
it's like,
basically.
well, yeah, I guess that strengthens your character a little bit. You're like,
Definitely,
dude, this
definitely.
blows.
Yeah, it
Especially
did
because you're so
blow, yeah.
excited for it.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we can wrap up soon.
Yeah.
So, but I want to ask, how do you think that this has like transformed you, and how do you kind of envision sort of having this experience like affect your future? And do you have any like big plans in the horizon for, whether it's, you mentioned like a documentary, before we started the podcast, like tell me what you got, I guess, like in the near future.
Yeah, in the near future, I'll be going back to school for sure.
What do you study?
Economics and public policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, in terms of my studies, I think this has made me want to have a somewhat of like a climate focus, like climate policy focus.
Yep.
Especially like I'm almost done with my actual major, so I can kind of like take it in a more elective approach. And then the final year of my studies, I'll probably be focusing on like some kind of thesis. So I'm kind of thinking about like how to focus that on something related to climate policy.
Okay.
And I think that's largely driven by like my experience this year and seeing like climate change up close. We saw that in terms of like forest fires. We saw that on the AT with like a very weird winter that occurred. We saw that on the CDT with abnormal lightning strikes, and then up in Glacier National Park where all these glaciers have receded. We saw that like constantly.
Yeah.
And I think like seeing that up close had a huge impact on me where, not thinking about climate change as something like of the future, but realizing that it has a big impact on outdoor experiences today. And I think that's like kind of a powerful tool for people who are, not as sure of, what's going on in the climate, because it's one thing to like read about, statistical analyses of where we'll be like 40, 50 years down the road. And it's another thing to think about, what fires are doing to the West Coast and people's lives right now.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think had a huge impact on me. The other is, that degree of solitude and finding peace in experiences that like aren't socially interactive, but finding peace like in experiences that are like focused on solitude, focused on self, and also focused on like nature around me. I think also it's just like created a bigger thirst for adventure. Like every time I, get to like a mountaintop, or every time like you get to a mountain pass or climb something, like you always kind of, for me at least, there's always like this feeling of like, oh, when I get there, like I'll be like satisfied.
Yeah.
But like it's just not satisfying. Like I mean, it's fulfilling, but it's not satisfying.
Yeah.
And like I just feel very thirsty for like more of those experiences, and to push further beyond. Because like I don't think we like met our potential this year. Like I don't think we even came close to it.
Yeah.
We have like a couple other projects that we're thinking about sending in the next like couple of years. Nothing like we're gonna like talk about in the next bit, because like I just don't want to. I think overall it's made us so, like me especially, like very excited about continuing to expand our horizons in like the outdoor space.
Do you think that you'd ever do something like that again? Not like, maybe not like all three trails, but anything of like a similar magnitude to any trails? Or
I want to do something bigger.
Okay.
That's the idea, I think.
That's why you haven't.
Bigger.
That's why you feel like you haven't met your potential yet, because
definitely
there's like bigger things on the horizon.
I think so. I think it will need some time to like decompress, and like I feel very passionate about finishing my studies as well.
Yeah. Good, man. Yeah. You probably like after doing this, you probably feel like you can do almost anything, right?
It's a dangerous thing to think that you can that you can do anything. But I think that's like the extreme of where I fall on certain days. Like I try to be careful about like having that sense of hubris, because that's like when you get into a lot of danger, I think. Like that's a big thing we took on this year, is like anytime we got cocky is like when we almost ran into huge problems,
Well, it must be humbling, like,
definitely,
you know what
humbling.
I mean?
Yeah. But at the same time, I think it is like a huge confidence grower in thinking that we can do something bigger.
Yeah. Well, it's like I just did this, so what else can I do?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I remember even when I first traveled, like for my first time, I was like, oh dude, like now I felt like I could do it, and I did it on my own. Yeah. And I was largely by myself. So I was like, well, I just want to like keep my ambitions. Like I want to, raise the bar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
you're also doing a podcast right now.
Yeah.
That people can find you at.
Yeah. So we have a podcast out right now called Impossible Odds by Backpacker. And today, actually, the 5th of 8 episodes dropped. So there's 3 more episodes coming out. I imagine by the time that this comes out, they'll probably all be out. So, yeah, you look that up anywhere that you get your podcasts.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it should be out.
Is it just you and Jackson on the podcast?
There's a host from Backpacker as well.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so we created all the content, and then Backpacker produced it, turned it into like a real narrative.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, dude, congratulations again on this epic feat, and it really is epic.
Thanks,
and I'm really stoked for you and whatever you and Jackson have on the horizon. I'm looking forward to seeing more from you guys. So I'm just pumped that you came and talked to me about everything like that, because I love the outdoors and I love people and I love people who enjoy the outdoors. So
thanks, man. Thanks for having me, and yeah, stoked to see what you end up doing with the podcast, and yeah, hopefully catch you in the White Mountains at some point as well.
Yeah, buddy. We'll go on a hike sometime.
Sounds good.
All right, brother. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining me and Sammy on this podcast. This episode is Satisfaction Guaranteed.
Did you just come up with that on the
Gotta
spot?
do it every. Oh no, I do it every time.
Okay, gotcha.